Rule number one, don't open the door.
I need a little more up top and a little less down below.
Amber alert. Oh God, something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. In orbit of Uranus.
It smells.
I don't even want to talk about it.
Oh no, you love me. You know you love me.
Just don't let it touch the.
You know, that's great, but give me a little more.
Why are you shooting at me?
You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.
Hello out there in podcast and YouTube land. You have reached Johnny Has the Keys, where we talk about horror movies and science fiction films and those key elements that lift and separate them from the average genre fare. Are you new to us? Well, we would like to welcome you. David and I are old friends that get together once a week and talk about old movies in depth, one in particular from a vast array of movies. We basically cover a century of movies, but we pick, 40 from different decades. And we do this blind. We go into it not having talked about them, so we don't know what each other is going to say. And for those of you coming back, you already know this. I'm just trying to educate you newcomers out there. We're glad to have you aboard. I am here with my good friend, David Horton. David, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. That was a great intro. I think that sums us up pretty succinctly, as they say. And also liked your intonation there. It kind of gave it that very bombastic feel, which kind of works with our movies of choice this week. So
that's true. Cool. That's true. And it is a movies thing. It is a double feature episode. So.
Yeah, we have a double feature today. So we're glad to be here and glad to be doing this. Normally we start with a little, what we've done in our genre week. What have we done genre related sort of thing? And I try to watch at least one or two films a week just to have something, for us to talk about, but also because I love it. But unfortunately this week I'm still obsessed with The Expanse. And I think I mentioned it last week that that's what I'm doing right now. I'm actually reading there needs to be a term for that when you're an audiobook guy now, and you don't physically read it with your eyes, you read. Because I've noticed when I'm talking with you, you call it reading, even though you're not actually reading.
I've always called it reading, but now I'm kind of, I don't know. I do both. I guess I'm a whore.
Yeah. You just love literature.
It's like, give it to me every way you can, baby. It's in the eyes and in the ears. So
right.
Yeah.
Right. But I think there needs to be a new term for, what do you, for listen reading or listening to audiobooks. Anyway, I'm doing The Expanse and I'm up to book 5. There's
nice.
7 in the series. I hope to finish them hopefully before the end of the month and finish that entire series off. Really good. And yay, I want to give a plug to Audible because I'm really enjoying it and liking the way you can earn credits and do stuff and everything. So those of you who do know us know that I've mentioned The Expanse several dozen times in our history of the podcast, just because I think it's one of the greatest science fiction series ever. And the books are proving to be even, it's interesting listening to it after seeing the series because, I'm fascinated with process anyway. And it's interesting to see what they chose to change, cut, combine characters, edit characters, change things. It's very interesting.
I was going to ask you how it varies. Is it closely following what you've watched?
The series is a really good adaptation of the novels so far, and each season of the series is one of the books. The big major things they do is the books kind of introduce characters as the story goes along. What they've done is in the first season, they actually take a couple of scenes from like the 4th book and throw that character in. So we at least have an establishment of that character early in the series. So when they come back into the story later, we have, we know them better. It's not just a new character thrown in for a villain of the week kind of thing.
Gotcha.
sort of thing. So it's really good. The adaptation's great.
And is the series over? You were talking like it is.
Yes, the series is finished.
Okay.
They did not do the last book, from what I understand.
I wonder why.
They just, because remember the series was sci-fi to begin with, which was amazing because it was really, really good. And it was on the Sci-Fi Channel, which seems like a misnomer to those of you who know the Sci-Fi Channel.
Right.
But anyway, it was really, really good. But then they canceled it. Amazon bought the rights because Jeff Bezos loved the series. And he said, I'll do whatever we can to keep this series going. It's great. And so they pumped all this money into it and kept it alive and went on for, 4 more years. So yeah, I highly recommend it. It's probably my 3rd favorite science fiction series of all time ever.
Awesome. Very good.
Yeah. What about you?
I've ventured into familiar territory, territory that we were in a lot 30 years ago and that we are being immersed back into again now. And that is Scream 6. Ghostface Takes Manhattan, as we so fondly refer to it as.
And this is the newest one?
This is the newest one.
Okay.
Several weeks back, I talked about watching Scream 5, which is technically called Scream. It doesn't have a 5 in it, so it's a little confusing. Very, very much like the Halloween reboot. I'm assuming there will be a 3rd in this franchise, this new mini franchise of the same franchise. This one was directed by the same folks, Matt Bettinelli Olpin and Tyler Gillette. They also are known for Ready or Not, which is a movie I have not seen, other than the one prior to this, the Scream prior to this. Written by the same folks that did the Scream prior to this, a guy named James Vanderbilt, who I told you is working on The Long Walk, a Stephen King adaptation. I did not know there was a Stephen King adaptation of The Long Walk being produced right now for film. It's an old Botman book, so I'm looking for that. And then Gary Busick, who also worked on Ready or Not and was a story editor on Castle Rock. So again, I mentioned this last time with the other film. There's a pretty good pedigree behind these movies. Again, in this one, the only old character from the original back is Gail Weathers, the Courtney Cox character.
So what's her name? Isn't in it?
Neve Campbell.
Neve Campbell.
That was very controversial because she dropped out of it while they were filming.
Okay.
And the guy that plays Dewey is not back because this is set in New York City. And Courtney plays Gail Weathers, who is still a news person. I can't remember if she's on a channel in New York now or not. But again, I like the strength of these 2 films to me is not bringing back the other characters. I like the young cast they're using. I like the new directions they're going. So to me, bringing back those faces is almost just needless fan service. And ironically enough,
running around in the subways and stuff.
Well, ironically enough, I liked this movie better than its predecessor.
Really? Okay.
I did. I actually had a better idea that I wish they had done. I was like, oh, if they do this, this would be fantastic. And they don't do it. So it kind of ticks me off. But they do it on kind of a small scale. My whole idea was, what if Ghostface was a cult of people obsessed with Ghostface? And that means Ghostface could be anywhere because anybody could be Ghostface.
True.
That's not exactly what they do, but they kind of do that on a small scale version. I mentioned there's a scene in a Coming to Get You earlier or last year, I guess it was, that there's a scene on a subway at Halloween and everybody's dressed like a horror movie character, including Ghostface, which is kind of funny because Ghostface in the meta world is from the movie Stab, which is I'm not going to get into all that. Anyway, this movie scored 76 on Rotten Tomatoes. The other one scored 76 as well. I would give this one a couple of notches higher. I did like Scream 6 better. And that's all I'm going to say about it.
Wow.
Well, it's on Paramount Plus if you want to watch it. So
And this has been going on for how long? When was the first screen? Like
1996.
96.
Yeah.
Wow.
And this is the sixth. Yeah, this is
Film.
the sixth movie, the sixth film. Exactly.
And this is the section of the reboot, right? Essentially the rebooted franchise.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
They did like 3 films, I think, with Wes Craven. I can't remember if Wes did the 4th film, but no one really seems to like the 4th film. So I don't think I've watched it. And now so that's kind of like the intermission. And then this is the beginning of a new trilogy, 5, 6, and
Okay.
I'm thinking 7, maybe.
Well, Ghostface can go on forever.
Apparently so. And 1 million people have murderous intent, obviously, because there's someone else that's Ghostfaced every film pretty much. So,
Yeah. One's born every year.
yeah. So let's see how you're going to segue from that.
Segue from that. Well, this is for a long time, people have been talking about Ghostface since 96. So there you go.
So much the time has gotten away from us.
So yes, so we are actually going into time this particular time. This is this particular episode. We are doing a double feature. We are covering H.G. Wells' The Time Machine and the other writer of the time, Jules Verne's Mysterious Island. A really cool, eclectic double feature. I really
the second time travel movie we've done this season already, too.
And I really liked watching these two together. It was very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
After watching Mysterious, I was thinking, man, I wonder if we should have paired that with 20,000. But I'm glad we paired it in this same kind of time frame. Those of you who haven't seen them, just really briefly, well, I guess we normally in our double features, we do them one at a time. Want to do Time Machine first?
I agree. Yeah, we have to because the keys are going to be different in some cases, and it's probably better just to cover them separately.
Well, Time Machine came out in 1961, directed by George Powell. Powell is probably known to a lot of people for an incredibly great science fiction movie called War of the Worlds, but also several others. Great producer of the time. It was written by David Duncan, based on H.G. Wells' novel from 1890. Stars Rod Taylor, Alan Young, and Yvette Mimieux. Mimieux.
I love to say her name.
In a nutshell, it is New Year's Eve of 1900, and you have a character named George, who is loosely based in the movie on H.G. Wells himself.
George Wells. Yeah.
Yes. Who several of his friends are waiting around because they've been invited to dinner. He's keeping them waiting. They're going, what's up with all that, everything else. He finally shows up late and he's very disheveled. And he tells them that for the past week, he has been to the future. And he recounts the week before. So the entire movie bookends with a flashback. Before and after. Basically, what has happened is George, through some unknown technology that is not explained either in the book or in the movie, has developed a time machine, the literal time machine. In fact, the biggest key from this is the debut of that phrase, time machine, came from this novel.
In the 1800s or whenever he wrote it.
Yeah. In 1890. Yeah.
Okay.
But George has the ability, there is no talk of going into the past. Instead, he wants to see the future. He wants to see what mankind will become. And he basically goes through both major world wars. He goes through an atomic disaster in 1966, since this movie came out in 61.
Yeah, he goes 6 years into the future.
And then he goes literally thousands of centuries into the future. And finds a world that is divided into basically 2 species of human descendants. One is the Eloi, who are these childlike, sort of innocent
idiots.
Yeah, sort of. And then the the villainous, scary, frightening Morlocks, which live in caves under the ground with machines and all that, and have devolved into cannibalism. It's a big society. George finally, the Morlocks take his time machine, so that's how he's forced to kind of survive with Eloy for a while. But then he recovers it, gets back, and is there to arrive for the bookend. But then it ends with that little bitty coda at the very end where George says goodbye to his friends. They go, yeah, fine, nice story. Not really buying it, George. They leave. His best friend, of course, still kind of pseudo believes him or thinks he believes him, discovers that George in his last few, after everyone leaves, decides he's going to go back to the future. Pardon the key pun there. And spend his time with the Eloy and what's her name? The girl. Yeah.
Mina.
Weena.
Oh, Weena. Yeah.
Weena is her name. Had you seen this movie before? I assume you have.
Oh, right? I actually saw this movie recently because I talked about it as as a genre week thing on a season previous.
Okay.
But I love this movie. The first time I probably saw it was as a kid on like a Saturday afternoon. That's the way I remember it anyway.
Both of the films today that was mine too. Both of them I saw like on a Saturday afternoon.
Right. And I'm confusing them a bit because I said 6 years into the future. He actually goes way into the future, but it's only 6 years into the future of the time the movie was released. This movie, I'm going to correct you. It was not 61. It was 60 because Mysterious Island is 61. They're like a year apart.
Correct. Yep. My fault. Yep.
That is true. George Powell, who you mentioned, directed War of the Worlds, which is one of my favorite science fiction movies. He also did The Seven Faces of Dr. Leo, which I believe was Charles Beaumont. Didn't he write that?
Yes.
I'm
pretty sure he did.
Atlantis, the Lost Continent, but he was more known as a producer. And when I was looking at his produced stuff, he did War of the Worlds and When Worlds Collide, but he also did The Naked Jungle, which is that movie we were talking about during them, where the ants will eat you.
Ants will eat you. That is so true. Yes,
exactly. And he also did Houdini and Destination Moon. He did a lot of movies I associate with growing up in my past, old reruns that I would see on television.
Yeah. George Powell was great.
Yeah. And I love this movie. Everything about this movie I love because it's cool science fiction. It's time travel. It's very colorful. It's got a handsome leading man. It's got monsters. I mean, I just love everything about it. I really like this movie.
Yes, I completely agree with you. It's well directed. It's well paced. The music works in it. Rod Taylor is absolutely amazing because he carries this entire movie. Even in the scenes with his friends, he has a dynamic and it's so good. In his portrayal of George. And then, of course, when he goes into the future or even on the trek to the future, it's all him. I mean, thinking about it, watching it this time, he's literally sitting on a soundstage doing all of these looks to nothing, and in that day and age to be able to do that with that kind of special effects was great.
And none of the Eloys don't really talk, not much.
Right.
Anyway.
So he carries that entire sequence. And the Morlocks don't talk at all.
No, they just grunt.
They just grunt and growl,
Right.
But he is great in it. The production design is great. Like you said, the color. One of my keys is Hammer. This is a very Hammer color feel to it, that Victorian reds and the golds and the way the exteriors look so green and lush and pretty, all that. Yeah.
I mean, it's very reminiscent of War of the Worlds, which I love too.
Yes. Yeah.
As far as
another strong leading man.
Yeah. It was written by David Duncan. I noticed that wrote Fantastic Voyage, which is another movie that we've covered, or he adapted it actually, and then adapted this as well. But also some movie that you've told me I should watch that I've never seen called Monster on the Campus.
Yeah, Monster on Campus. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that movie, and you mentioned it, and I'm like, what the hell is that?
Oh, you should watch it. A lot of people always mentioned what's the I was a teenage werewolf. Was that
With
what's
Michael
his name?
Landon.
Landon? Michael
Yeah.
Landon?
Mhm.
Monster on Campus is scarier than that and better than that, and less corny, I think, than that movie was. So it's very good. Favorite scenes? Did you have scenes you really liked in it? Other than all of them in this? I mean, there's a lot of good scenes in this movie.
Well, the first scene where he comes through the door and he's all beat up and torn up and dirty and stuff. I think that's very effective. It's like, what the hell happened? Where'd he come from? I've been in the future. Any of the scenes with the Morlocks underground.
Of course,
the Morlocks. Well, of course I am. They're monsters and they have eyes that light up and they're just really cool looking. What else? The scenes where he jumps into other times, like in the future when there's lots of wars going on. Like he goes to World War II, doesn't he? I think he does.
Yes, he goes to both World Wars, 1 and 2. And then the third jump is to 1966, which is supposedly in the future of even the movie as it was done. And there's a nuclear attack while he's there.
Which is really weird because isn't there like lava or something?
Yeah, it basically, lava fills up, London or wherever he is.
Yeah, a nuclear attack brings up a volcano in London or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Basically. I agree with you. I like all of those scenes. I really liked the very kind of the prologue he did. Even before the credits, there's that very Twilight Zone-y feel of all the clocks in space and hourglass and
that was a key I had. Yes.
And all of this time kind of floating through space kind of feel to it. I love that. I loved the scene with his friends, the flashback scene. So he's trying to explain the fourth dimension and he has the miniature, which, oh my God, I would love that prop.
Yeah. It's cute.
And that I think that scene is really great in establishing that whole Victorian inventor feel, kind of thing to it. And I like you said, I like both the scenes with Philby in the future, with seeing his son and then seeing his son as an old man later on, and their dialogue and any scene with him and Philby. They're obviously best friends. He obviously cares a great deal about George enough so that he sets up, an entire trust to him, and no one can touch his house or his inventions or anything.
Honestly, if it weren't for Weena and the fact that Philby had a son, I would think there was a relationship between them two. They're pretty close.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. And there's, the whole Weena thing seemed forced to me. I think, I was even thinking, go back to Philby. He's pretty cool.
Right. And like, you're really falling in love with this woman that fast. Yeah.
There's that.
And I like how those two scenes where you were talking about, he goes and sees the friend in the future. I like in one, he's coming out of his house and it's all decrepit and condemned. And then in the second one, it's been torn down and now it's a memorial to him. I was like, yeah, this guy definitely loves you, man.
Yeah. And the fact that
it's a monument to you.
I love the temporal displacement thing. They explain time as it moves around you all the time. You don't move through time. Time moves around you. So the placement of his time machine becomes kind of a really cool little science fiction thing all the way through it in each of these time periods. Even so much so that after the volcano and the lava, he's encased in a mountain and has to wait literally thousands of centuries for the mountain to erode away.
Yeah, that's kind of creepy.
Sort of thing. So that was kind of interesting. And the fact that you're in this machine and you're literally observing time passing around you was a cool concept. Doing research, Wells has said that this was an examination of the caste structure of England and the haves and have-nots, literally. And that was his projection of the future. Of the haves are actually the ones that are the monsters. The have-nots, the haves are the the ignorant ones. The have-nots are the ones that do all of the work and support the society and everything else. So I thought it was very interesting, but giving them their own deficits, kind of thing. The Eloi have nothing. They don't have to worry about anything. Their physical needs are taken care of, but they're idiots. They have no ambition. They have not even to save one of their own who's drowning right in front of them, which is like their introduction.
Right.
Whereas the Morlocks have the technology and all of that, but they're forced into the caverns and forced underground, and they are cannibals. So
right. And they summon the Eloi periodically for dinner, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's buffet time. Yeah. There you
go. There's the steampunk sort of element to it as well, especially the machine itself. I love how it's so simple, though. There's just a dial that tells you what the date is, basically, and it won't work unless it has a key, which is just this handle with a big rhinestone on top of it.
Yeah, it has to have a crystal to power
crystal.
it.
Yeah. And if he takes it away, you can't run it. So that's like his key to his car.
Yeah. Yeah. But that design is so iconic in science fiction. It's a great design. It was designed by a guy named William Ferrari. And there's a really great documentary on the survival of that particular prop.
Yeah.
The fact that it was just basically after the movie was just tossed out kind of thing and went into, was just kept in storage and just kind of deteriorated and then sold off, and how it changed and how it changed hands.
It sold and then was found, I think, in bad condition or something.
Yeah. A guy named, I think his name was Bob Burns or something like that. Totally restored it, and it's now in a place. It's in my notes. Hold on. It's now in a place called the Home for Neglected Icons, which I assume is his kind of museum to.
That's cool.
To classic props and things.
Yeah,
which is very interesting. But yeah, it is so steampunk. Very very steampunk feel to all of that.
Right. The design,
kind of like when we were talking about First Men in the Moon. And how steampunky it looks. Again, another Verne property, but this is Wells. So
yeah, I buy that weird looking thing going through time more than I did that rickety ass ship of theirs going through space.
Was not rickety ass. It was made out of girders and
it's made out of wood.
It was big metal girder. Never mind.
That's right. It was girders. That's right.
Yes.
Okay.
I do have some trivia for this before you jump into cast.
Absolutely. I may have a little bit of trivia. I do.
Well, the first one I had, of course, I already mentioned, which was this was the first use of the term time machine and what that means. It also is, but the biggest trivia I have was in 1966. He basically, as soon as he lands, he looks around for a bit, and then there's this huge siren going off, and everyone is panicking and running to shelters, and he has no idea what's going on. And all these guards are pseudo guards, policemen, whatever. They keep coming up and, trying to push people into the underground chambers, grab his arm, and he shrugs off. And another guy, they keep running by him. If you stop and look at them for a second, they're wearing the uniforms from Forbidden Planet.
I think that was in my notes, maybe for keys, that they used a lot of things from Forbidden Planet. There was something else too.
That was my biggest trivia. Was Forbidden Planet recycled uniforms, the grays. So that was great. I love
the information rings were also from Forbidden Planet. As the navigation sphere, there's a large circular screen.
The circular screen sphere, yes, but not the talking rings. The talking rings were all part of this movie. So,
yeah.
But yes, cool.
The one of the trivia that I had that I thought was kind of interesting is that this is one of Guillermo del Toro's favorite movies, which makes perfect sense to me. I mean, it's probably one of the reasons why I like it. It's got monsters, it's got science, it's just got a lot going for it. Not just it's not just science fiction. It's not just horror. It's a little bit of both.
Yeah, and it also has a great mix of effects. It has matte paintings that are, they're kind of obvious now because of the hard matte lines, but it's got matte paintings, it's got lighting effects, it's got stop animation. So it's got a lot and makeup effects, even down to the stuff like the Morlock's eyes, the fact that they glow, and that made them so much scarier.
Yeah.
But so yeah, there's that.
I've got that singer and lyricist Peggy Lee, who I love a lot because she gives me fever, wrote a song for this that was not used. And I would like to hear that song. I should have looked that up to see if it's available.
Yeah.
But it's called The Land of the, I have Leo, but I'm sure it's probably Leoi. The Land of the Leoi, maybe. Anyway, that song was not used.
Yeah.
And then the only other trivia I have is what you were talking about with some of the placement of the actual prop. It said the original was sold at MGM Studio Auction in 1971, the same auction that originally sold the ruby slippers from Wizard of Oz. The winner was the owner of a traveling show. 5 years later, it ended up in a thrift store in Orange County. So that traveling show didn't last very long. And that's when the guy you mentioned, Bob Burns, purchased it for $1,000. And he used the blueprints from the original that George Powell had given him and restored it. And do you know who was on that restoration crew?
No.
DC Fontana.
Really? Excellent.
Yeah, from Star Trek. She,
yes,
script consultant and writer on Star Trek, was on the restoration crew, as was Michael Miner, an art director on Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan.
That's awesome. I didn't know Mike Miner did that. That's cool.
Yeah. So 2 Star Trek people from the original show and movies were instrumental in getting that thing restored.
Well, and he also, if you watch the documentary, it includes like a little 12-minute or 15-minute, something like that, short at the end of it with the restored prop that stars Rod Taylor, Alan Young, and Whit Bissell. All 3 are in the little short, and it's really cool.
Oh, that's neat.
And they're playing their characters again.
I didn't see any behind the scenes things. I should have looked on YouTube. I didn't think to do that.
Yeah, do that for this one because it's really cool. And it's only like a half-hour little thing about the restoration and putting it back and making sure that, all the attention to detail, like the sphere behind him that spins, it actually has 365 little cutouts in it for each day of the year.
Wow.
Just little stuff like that. That's pretty fascinating. So
I was going to ask you, I'm assuming because you read more science fiction than I, have you read the stories these are based on, or at least this one?
Yes. Yeah.
Are there a lot of differences?
No, not a lot. This is a really faithful adaptation.
That's good.
The book is a lot more, naturally, because he can do a lot more mentally with George. So there's a lot more of the
internal monologue, or
the whole internal structure, stuff like George's anger with the LOI are not just they're about complacency and the fact that you're not inventing, you're not being scientific, you're not embracing science and doing more and everything else, and if you don't, then you're just mediocre, and any society that doesn't advance its technology is a mediocre society. Kind of thing is a big preaching point in the novel. And I don't
you
think
just
that
reminded
comes out
me
as much.
of a scene that is one of my favorite scenes, and it's the last scene in the movie.
Yes.
Where they notice 3 books are missing from the shelf, and he says, which books would you take? And it's almost like directed to the audience. You decide what 3 books would be the most important to introduce to a new civilization.
Yeah. Great question.
Mm-hmm.
I found myself going, ooh, should I ask him that on the podcast? And then I went, well, I can't even answer that. It would take me a few hours to think about what would that be? What would those 3 novels be? Or not novels. They could be nonfiction.
Well, that's what I was thinking too. It would be really hard to choose. I mean, would I take Carrie or Salem's Lot. No, because you're going to introduce, a new civilization to vampires and telekinetic teenagers. I don't know.
Well, for me, it would be, would you take the foundations of physics,
Right.
or would you take some kind of philosophical, sort of thing, 1984 or some nonfiction about civilizations themselves? I mean, what's the purpose of the books? And that's in the novel too. The whole thing about what did George take with him?
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I love that. That was another thing I liked.
Yeah.
And I really like that actor that plays Philby.
Yeah. Alan Young, very good. Strong actor. I like the whole cast. I like the cast. That's a good segue. This cast is really strong.
It's solid.
Yeah.
There were some alternates, but not really many.
Right.
Paul Schofield was George Powell's first choice to play the time traveler.
Okay.
Also considered were David Niven and James Mason.
Ooh.
But then he decided it would be more advantageous to go with a strapping young man like Rod Taylor. And I think that was a good decision.
Yeah, very good.
It was good not only because Rod is a great actor, but because he does have that sex appeal that brings in the seats.
Yes.
He's got that, I don't know, that Rock Hudson type look that just women like. He is Australian. This was his first leading role.
Mm-hmm.
But 3 years later, he did The Birds, which we've already covered on this podcast. And I love him in that movie as well.
Yes.
He played, he's a Disney actor too. Don't know if you remember that, but he played Pongo in 101 Dalmatians.
Oh.
So his voice is very unique as well. He could voice act. Mm-hmm. And then before he died a few years ago, Quentin Tarantino persuaded him to play Churchill in Inglourious Bastards. He didn't want to do it.
Did not catch that. Yep.
Yeah, he suggested Albert Finney, who had played Churchill before, and Quentin pestered him until he finally relented because he was retired, and Quentin yanked him out of retirement to do that.
Right.
One other little bit of trivia I have on him that I absolutely love and I will always think of from here on out is that 20th Century Fox considered him for the role of Charlton Heston's Taylor on Planet of the Apes, in Planet of the Apes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, Planet of the Apes is classic and I love that film, but Charlton Heston totally overacts and is a little crazy in that movie. It would have been interesting to see Taylor's take on it.
Mm-hmm. It would have been a little more repressed, I'm sure. And Taylor is just a strong actor, just really good.
So, right. Yeah, and what's funny is the character's name's Taylor.
Yeah.
Rod Taylor plays Taylor in Planet of the Apes.
Yep.
You mentioned Alan Young plays Philby, both David and James. I can't remember which is which, but one's the father, one's the son.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of voice acting, that's primarily what he did. He didn't do a lot of stuff except for kid movies. And a lot of people considered this a kid movie because it's fantasy. But this is not a kid movie. It's an adult movie. He also did a lot of television as well.
Okay.
But he's got a very familiar face. It's like a Frank Capra face to me.
Very, very Capra-esque face.
That makes sense.
I could totally see that. Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally. Totally see that. Very Danny Kaye kind of feel to him, too.
Oh, yeah. He does look like Danny Kaye.
Yeah.
On to Weena, played by Yvette Mimieux, which I have always said, I love saying her name, Mimieux.
Yep.
Rod Taylor wanted Shirley Knight for the role.
I don't know that name.
I know the name, but I'm not really that familiar with her. Because I immediately thought Shirley Jones. No, that's not her. But anyway, Shirley Knight did not get the role. Obviously, it went to Yvette Mimieux. Her mother is French, but she was born in Hollywood. So whatever you've heard about Yvette, whatever you, sorry, I thought you were leaving for more than what you did.
No, sorry. I just have to
whatever you've heard about Yvette Mimieux, being some exotic French actress, in Hollywood. No, she was originally from Hollywood, born and raised there. She did movies like Where the Boys Are and Diamond Head, which were kind of those 50s teen movies, I guess you would say, or 60s teen movies.
Yeah.
And was discovered by Vincent Minnelli, who saw her in a play.
Good.
He cast her in something. I can't remember. I don't have that down. She was actually underage when shooting began. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
Yes, she turned 18 during the shoot. So she was not legally supposed to work a full shooting schedule, but she did.
Okay.
Imagine that. She is a very smart cookie, according to IMDb, and not what she normally played, which was kind of a sex blonde bombshell. She is a degreed anthropologist, and she is a very successful business person, particularly in real estate, which is what she ended up doing more of than acting.
Okay.
So I thought that was very interesting too. So she
I mean, I didn't think,
against type.
Weena doesn't give her a lot to do, honestly. It's part of the character itself, unfortunately. But, her later movies, I thought she did was a very good actress.
What do you recall any?
The big one was, what was her big one? It was like 3 or 4 years later. I cannot remember it right now.
It was in the 60s, I'm sure. But
yeah.
You look that up. I'll keep going.
This
movie also stars Sebastian Cabot, who I also really like. A very, very familiar face, English character actor, but most of us remember him as Mr. French on Family Affair, the butler to Brian Keefe, and the children, Buffy and Jody. Yes,
I
what
did
a watch
voice.
that show. Yeah,
what a voice.
Great voice. Speaking of which, he played Bagheera in Jungle Book, one of our favorite Disney movies. And he also narrated the Winnie the Pooh movies. And he also played Sir Ector in Sword in the Stone. So Sebastian Cabot was a Disney actor.
Oh, yeah.
But other than that, he did lots of television in the latter years. So we love him.
Uh-huh.
Do you have a Muse movie?
No, I can't remember which one it is, but I mean, there's so many that I'm remembering that I go,
sorry, I didn't mean
to
send you in a rabbit hole.
Tom no, that's
Helmore,
okay.
Tom Helmore played Anthony Bridewell, one of the gentlemen that he's friends with around the table. Yes. He's known for Vertigo. I didn't remember him, but he was in Vertigo. Whit Bissell, who played Walter Kemp, you may remember we saw him in Creature from the Black Lagoon as Dr. Thompson. He was also an evil scientist in the aforementioned I Was a Teenage Werewolf, because I was wondering where you were going with that, as well as Soylent Green, The Magnificent Seven, and lots of other television shows. So Whit Bissell's been around the block.
Oh, Whit Bissell he was also in Star Trek, the original series.
Doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah.
Yeah. He was in Trouble with Tribbles. He's the head of the K7 space station.
Is he the bartender?
No, he's the administrator of K7. That's Whit Bissell.
Because I really like the bartender in that episode.
Remember, there was Mr. Darwin, who's the Klingon. Then there's Mr. Barris, who is the mean guy. Right. Okay. And then I cannot remember his name now, but he was that's who he played in Star Trek.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And it's hard for me to look up such minute things as television when I'm doing this. But Doris Lloyd, the last person that I'm going to talk about, played Mrs. Watchett. She is a British stage actress that has done over 150 movies. She played the Rose in Alice in Wonderland. So there's a lot of Disney connected to this movie, I've noticed. Like 3 Disney actors in this movie.
Well, and that's a tie-in to our next movie, too. There's Disney tie-ins to it.
Certainly is.
So, yeah.
But she was also in Sound of Music and a movie called Midnight Lace that I always like to mention because it was a thriller with Doris Day that my mother just adored. She thought it was a great movie. It was kind of an Alfred Hitchcock wannabe movie. And then that's all I have as far as cast. But as far as awards, this movie won an Academy Award. Do you want to guess for what?
Visual effects?
Special effects. Yeah.
I would imagine.
It was nominated for a Hugo for Best Dramatic Presentation, but it lost to as well as Village of the Dam lost to, guess what?
I have no idea.
1960.
I don't know, honestly.
The Twilight Zone.
Really?
Yeah. Both those movies, both those science fiction movies, The Time Machine and Village of the Dam, lost that year to The Twilight Zone.
Yeah, that's weird to me. I would have gone with either one of those, but I would probably go.
I think it's because there's such a collaboration behind The Twilight Zone. It's just got more science fiction people, probably
Possibly
writers.
So you can get more votes.
Well, yeah, and it's the Hugos. So usually they lean towards writing. So it would make more sense, that Harlan Ellison and Rod Serling and Richard Matheson or whatever all involved in Twilight Zone. It is not on the 1001 movies you must see before you die. And I think that's a shame.
I agree. I think it definitely should be. Definitely should be from a science fiction.
It's classic sci-fi gold.
Definitely. And started so much. I mean, led to so much. That whole Victorian steampunk era kind of feel was based on the aesthetic from this, based on the aesthetic from Wells and Verne. So,
Right.
It's important. I did have in my notes, and you didn't mention him, but Paul Frees. Paul Frees is the voice of those talking rings. Because as soon as I heard it, I went, "Oh my gosh, I know that voice. Who is that? Who is that? Who is that?"
I didn't put it in there.
If you look up Paul Frees on IMDb, you'll scroll for hours.
The name sounds very familiar to me. I don't know why I didn't see it.
He is a voice actor. Basically, that's his primary thing. But he has literally done 1,000 movies. Literally. Okay. Most of them animated, of course, or voiceovers or kid stuff. But you would remember him from all of the. Do you remember Mr. Winter in the Burgermeister Meisterburger? Put one foot in front of the other. You know that?
Yes. Yes.
Whatever that.
Santa Claus is coming to town.
Yes. He's
Rudolph,
the Freeze.
One of the two. Yeah.
He's the Winter Warlock in that. And he's done so many other of those animations, filmation stuff, and Sigmund and the Sea Monster. I mean, he's just done thousands of
I can tell you why I didn't have him in my notes. I usually do the primary cast and then they separate it into the rest, which is listed alphabetically. And I just did not. Yeah, I just didn't include it in my notes.
Yeah, I looked him up special because as soon as I heard the voice for the rings, I was going, ooh, I know that.
Did he do any Star Trek voices?
No, but he's done a lot of voiceover narrations and stuff like the narration at the end of Beneath the Planet of the Apes. That's him. Okay. That's his voice about the missiles going off.
The name is very familiar to me. Yeah. As soon as you said it, I was like, I know that name. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, cool. I like, and then before we jump, the last thing to keys, just what do I have in my notes? I've got, I do have a funny watch note I took, which is, that's the trouble with time machines. You can't leave them lying around. People will just pick them up and move them.
And drag them away.
Yeah. Right. I did like, I thought it was a good choice by Powell to do that blinding effect with the Morlocks. The way he actually did when he lit the match and suddenly the whole frame goes white.
Orange. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a really cool effect. And then it would slowly come back into focus and color as the match went out.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I thought that was really neat and different. I got in my
to notes. I like War of the Worlds better just because to me it's scarier. But honestly, both this movie and War of the Worlds are right up there as far as classic cinema that I think should be on 1001 movies you must see.
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily. Yes. Both George Powell, both well done, both great to their, paying good adaptations of their original works kind of thing. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And then I like the cave sets. I love the Morlock design. I like
I've got a key to
burn.
all of this shit you're talking about.
Okay, let's go to the keys. Let's do it.
This whole movie reminds me of a Star Trek episode. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
it screams Star Trek. As a matter of fact, I mentioned various ways that it screams Star Trek. Let me see if I can find it. The whole Morlock sequence, once they're in the future in the Morlock world, that's where the whole Star Trek comes into effect for me. The Morlocks look like that salt-sucking monster from the Man Trap in the first season of Star Trek.
Do you know why?
Is it the same designer?
Yep.
Okay.
A lot of the effects were designed by Jim Danforth and his team. I can't remember the name now, but there's a team, the company that did the special effects for this, and they did almost all the special effects for Star Trek.
Right. Well, I mean, like I said, this movie, one of the reasons I like it is it reminds me of a good Star Trek episode. I mean, even Rod Taylor is like Captain Kirk. He's hot and smart and, just a man's man or whatever. And then
he can do the fight scenes.
He can do the fight scenes, and he clearly will ignore the prime directive. So he's Kirk, basically.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, Star Trek is my first key then. I wasn't going to do it first, but you kind of pushed me there.
No, that's great. I'm glad I did, because that totally works for me. I mean, it's totally true. Mine, I already said one was Hammer. I think Hammer's an influence.
The movies, Hammer movies?
Yeah, I think they were influenced by this kind of aesthetic kind of thing.
Color.
I said the same thing with First Men in the Moon.
Okay. I see what you mean.
The bright coloration, the Victorian setting, the feel of like that plush leather against the gentleman who's in his 3-piece waistcoat sort of, kind of discussion.
Now you've got Peter Cushing in the role.
Yeah, right.
Running around smacking Morlocks with a cane.
Yes. I've got, of course, any kind of time machine movie that has come from this. H.G. Wells coined the phrase, but it just went into the vernacular of science fiction, and even up to Back to the Future.
Back to the Future, yeah.
What is it? Hollywood Hot Tub or something? Hot
Tub Time Machine.
Hot Tub Time Machine. There you go.
Yeah. I've never seen it, but I know what you're talking about.
Right. I haven't either. But that, so we can't say that, this was not an influence on those, because it definitely was.
Right. I was going to say, obviously, the novel, because it came from the novel. And my second thing was time travel movies. And before I got to Star Trek, I was going to mention that the opening title sequence in this movie is like the Twilight Zone, with those clocks flying around. And you've already mentioned that. So you've already mentioned some of that.
Yeah. I was incorrect earlier. I said the novel came out in 1890. It came out in 1895, actually. And it was inspired. I found this as a key. H.G. Wells has said that he was inspired by a novel called News from Nowhere that came out in 1890. Now, I've not read that novel or know anything about it, but in a thing I read, he said H.G. Wells was quoted as that's what gave him the inspiration for this novel.
I wonder who that's by, or if they're famous, or
I do not know. I did not research that enough. My fault.
I have something that this movie reminds me of that is not famous at all. And I've talked about this before. Sometimes I'll talk about really stupid movies that I remember from childhood that you can hardly ever find these days. And there's one called The Bubble from 1966 that is about this town that the aliens have encased in a dome, and every certain time of the day there's like this alarm sounding, and all the humans go to this place because they're being summoned by the alien. It is very similar to when the Morlocks summoned the Eloi to go to be, sacrificed or eaten or whatever. In the caves. So this movie reminds me of that. Of course, that movie came out 6 years later, but
interesting,
and starred one of the people from the Mod Squad, the white dude.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I've got another Star Trek reference, which is what I said earlier. The time machine is powered by a crystal. And, about 7 years later, Roddenberry will have a spaceship that is powered by
crystals. Yeah.
crystals.
Well, then you could just say Land of the Lost.
And that's the next one, Land of the Lost, which is all the crystals.
Right.
Although our next movie is much more so Land of the Lost than this one, but this one does
it
have
very
that
much so is the next one is. But this one is also Land of the Lost in that the Morlocks are similar to the Sleestaks as they live in caves and they're the monsters are scary and what have you. But yeah, that's very funny. Land of the Lost.
And I have a Star Wars key because the Morlocks, and when you see them in the caves, they remind me of the Jawas because you just see like their silhouettes and then their bright eyes. Their red, burning, little piercy eyes. So it's very Star Wars to me.
I mentioned that this movie in the Hugos, along with Village of the Damned, lost out to Twilight Zone that year for Best Dramatic Representation. Yeah. But I have to say, the Eloi looked like the children in Village of the Damned.
Village of the Damned, yeah. The blonde and the square cut. And
those crazy haircuts, man. The page boy blonde haircuts. They just look like those grown-up versions of those little kids.
And what was George Powell trying to say with the blondes were stupid? I don't know. What was he trying to do with that? There were no brunette Eloi,
Is it how do you pronounce it? Is it Eloi? I thought it was Eloi.
I think it's Eloi. Isn't it?
Eloi or something, yeah.
Eloi. E-I-E-I-O. It's one of those. I have one you may like. I have The Evil Dead.
Yeah, I have that.
the stop motion decomposition.
I was like, it looks like it was directly lifted from Evil Dead.
Or vice Evil versa. Dead, obviously, lifted it. Yeah. Sam obviously went, hey, can we do that effect like the Morlock does when he dies?
Yeah. When he rapidly decomposes, that's exactly what it looks like from the original Evil Dead. I was like, stop motion. This movie's got stop motion.
Yeah.
That's not the only stop motion. It's got other stop motion in it too, somewhere. It's got a lot of good effects.
Well, the first one I noticed was the plants that he notices growing around him when he's just going forward, a day or so, and he's watching the plants open up and then bloom and then close and bloom and close.
Okay, you brought me to something I meant to bring up. Do you really think that mannequin in that window would be like that for so many years? Because he based
for 30 years, it's going to be that way. Well, 66, it was still there in 66. So 60 years, that one mannequin is going to be there.
That store is not going to change. It's going to be the same store with the same mannequin and the same dresser or whatever for 60 years. I do love the way he uses it to show fashion changes with women throughout the decades, but it's not practical. It's kind of funny when you think about it.
Agreed. I mean, they could have used different mannequins, different setups or whatever, but to your point, I really love the intent he had, which is the decades were changing through women's fashion.
And fashion
that was interesting.
Changes. Yeah. I liked it too.
I've got Doctor Who, of course, the TARDIS. If you go inside the TARDIS, especially the early designs of the TARDIS, when they went inside, it was very steampunk Victorian with the dials and levers to do the different time shifts and everything. So it was felt very much inspired by this.
I already mentioned, or you did really, the Forbidden Planet ties to this movie. Mm-hmm. This time machine makes other appearances in movies. Did you know that it makes an appearance in Gremlins? I didn't know that.
I don't know where, but I seem to recall, yes.
It appears, then disappears in the Inventors Convention scene in Gremlins.
That makes sense.
Because I haven't seen that movie since it came out to theaters, so I don't remember it at all.
Yeah.
Other than my Gremlins.
That's a great segue to mine, because my last key for this is, and I've mentioned it, I think once before, was Big Bang Theory. There's an entire
Right.
episode where Sheldon gets the actual prop and he thinks it's a real time machine. and he's on medication at the time and he starts thinking that it's actually going to take him forward in time, which is really good. They do the effect and everything else because I think I also read that one of the effects guys on Danforth's team made a rapidly revolving shutter to do the, on George's face for the time machine shifts. And he patented that device to change lighting that quickly to give
I figured it was just
effect.
a color wheel or something.
Yeah, no, it was something that he designed that would actually not only change the, shutter on and off, but also change color to give that whole time shift feel.
Interesting.
So yeah. Technology invented to make it, the effect work.
Yeah. I only have one other key. Who did you say was the makeup guy that did the Morlocks from Star Trek?
Special effects guy, Jim Danforth.
Okay, because there's apparently a specialist in makeup as well named William Tuttle. Does that name ring a bell?
Yep. Tuttle.
Right, well,
Tuttle did a lot of Outer Limits.
Okay, and that makes sense because this looks like a monster from Outer Limits too.
Yes.
He used the look of this Morlock. Oh, well, maybe he didn't do the Morlocks. Maybe he just did this in the future. Never mind. Anyway, William Tuttle used the look of the Morlocks for his pattern of the abominable snowman in the Seven Faces of Dr. Lowe.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
So maybe Tuttle didn't do the movie, but he went on to do Dr. Lowe. So
that would make sense.
So that was influence as well. I have not seen Dr. Lowe since I was a little kid, so I don't remember it very well.
Is that the one where
it's Peter Sellers, isn't it?
Is it Peter Sellers or is it somebody else? I thought it was like Tony Randall or somebody.
It may be
that plays.
It is Tony Randall and Barbara Eden.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
And it's it's a George Powell movie, and it was written by Charles Beaumont. That's why I'm familiar with it, just because of Beaumont.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah,
that's all I have. But
we're not awesome.
Done.
Then we're not done, folks. We're only halfway there. We're now jumping a year ahead in production.
A whole year,
but we're jumping about 60 years back in storyline. And we are going to the adaptation of Jules Verne's Mysterious Island. Before I do the synopsis, can you tell me, do you remember the first time you saw this? You said you saw it on the Saturday afternoon, sort of thing. Like
exact same scenario as Time Tunnel. I saw this on a Saturday afternoon. I'm sure this one was, however, encouraged by my mother because she was like, "Oh, this is a great movie. You need to watch this." And I'm sure I was in her hair and she was trying to distract me with something, and she put me in front of the television to watch this movie.
I have a fairly vivid memory of this just because I think I had seen like the trailer the week before or the promo for it the week before. And, next Saturday we're showing, giant monsters and and Captain Nemo and stuff. And I remember sitting down and watching it, and it starts out with, the war and the balloon and the prison. And I'm like going, where's the giant monsters? This movie's boring. I don't like this. What's happening?
That's very funny. Because I have a similar reaction now. I'm like, why is Jules Verne writing about the Civil War? He's French.
But my other big memory of this is the giant bee, which I thought was really killer, and Captain Nemo, but just the Nautilus, not really Nemo. It was the Nautilus and me freaking out with the Nautilus. And that's it. I totally repressed Nemo, his whole story, the whole ending of this movie, all of that. It was like I was watching it for the first time this time when I watched it. I was going,
really?
Oh my God, I forgot all of this crap. I forgot
all the pirate
stuff.
I watched this one again recently because I don't know if you remember a few years back, I did a Harryhausen marathon on Turner Classics, and this was one of them. Because this is, folks, the third Ray Harryhausen film we've done. Because
we should.
20 million miles to Earth, and we've done First Man on the Moon, and this is the third.
Yes. This was okay. So to that point, it was produced by Charles Schneer, who produced all of Harryhausen's films. We've talked about it before in the other two podcasts, and they were obviously very good friends, if not more so, that sort of thing. They obviously did a lot together. It is based on the Jules Verne novel. It's directed by a really guy with a very unique history named Cy Endfield, which we'll get to when we talk about that a little bit. It's written by John Preble. Is that how you pronounce it, I guess? And Daniel Ullman and Crane Wilbur. So 3 different guys wrote this adaptation. You would ask if I'd read it. Yes, it's a fairly accurate adaptation, but there's a lot more in the the last half of the novel.
From what I understand, there's no giant creatures in the novel at all. That was all added for the movie.
Correct. Yeah. But there is the whole Nemo stuff. There is the whole, because this was essentially a sequel to not only 20,000 Leagues, but also Tales of a Castaway, which was another novel that Verne wrote. And he kind of combines that in this novel, but not in this movie, which is why it's not referenced really in the movie. Okay. They find the diary of Atherton, the guy that was living there in the granite fortress before them, kind of
in the land of the lost caves.
Yeah. Right. In the novel, he actually ends up, we find out that, there's a surprise twist that he's actually alive on another island. He tried to escape and didn't make it, just made it to another island. And the last part of the book is them trying to go rescue him from the pirates. Then 2 of their members get captured, and it's all about this whole pirate war among the 2 islands at the end. And it was kind of boring and didn't work. And I'm glad they cut it from this, but it still didn't help much in this either. The basic story is that you have 4 Union prisoners who are in a Confederate prison camp. Yeah. They end up escaping with a hydrogen weather balloon, and they also take along with them. One of them is
the Confederate soldier that knows how to fly it. Basically.
Correct. Yeah. And one of them is actually not stated in the movie, but in the novel is the former slave of the captain. And that's
I didn't realize that.
That's why he calls him Neb, and he's given him his freedom and everything else. In the novel, they christen the island Lincoln Island in the novel. And they don't in the movie, of course, because they avoid all of the anything that really, once they're on the balloon, anything that relates to politics is gone, sort of thing. They end up traveling for days and days, at least 4, probably more, westward in this balloon above all the storm and the gale. They end up crash landing on a, quote, titular mysterious island. And also end up finding 2 other shipwreck survivors, which just ironically happen to be female. How convenient. And they end up fighting off some gigantic creatures. And then in the last act, they're attacked by pirates. Yes, they're attacked by pirates and rescued by Captain Nemo from 20,000 Leagues, who has brought his Nautilus submarine vessel here to essentially, he obviously survived the end of 20,000 Leagues, but he doesn't survive here as they get off the island by raising the pirate boat that he sank with a mine, and traveling away to the back to civilization. We hope, probably. What did you think of this movie?
I've watched it twice in the last couple of years, and it's not as good as the movie I remember. It's a movie I would have enjoyed as a kid, but it doesn't hold up like The Time Machine to me at all.
Completely agree with you. I was word for word almost agree with you on that. Yes.
And when I did some history on the production, I was like, well, no wonder, because I've got that Cy Endfield did nothing but B movies I've never heard of. John Preble wrote for television. So did Daniel Ullman. And Crane Wilbur, the only thing I know him from is a movie we covered called House of Wax, which was that Vincent Price vehicle in the 50s, I believe. The only thing really going for this movie, two things. One is Bernard Herrmann did the music, and I was humming that music all day after I watched this. Dun, 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 dun. And Ray Harryhausen, super dynamation. You know, those to me,
I mean, not just your dynamation. This is super dynamation.
Yeah. So I mean, Bernard Herrmann and Harryhausen to me are what make this movie. However, I will say I do like the cast. There's a good cast in this movie.
See, I think the exact opposite. I like no one in this cast. I vaguely like the New York reporter dude a little bit, but nobody, even Herbert Lom, he's trying, but he could never, ever measure up to James Mason. I mean, there's just no way. And my research on the making of this, it actually intrigued me and made me want to look into a lot more, but, turns out that Columbia did like an entire year and a half of pre-work on this. They did an adaptation, and they had actually signed James Mason to recreate his role of Nemo. But then it just went into production hell and turnaround and everything else. And it was finally kind of given to Schneer because Schneer signed a 6-picture deal. And part of it was at least one of those 6 has to be this mysterious island thing that we've had on the back burner for about 3 years here. So do something with it. But Schneer then moved his entire production company because he and Harryhausen liked it better to Shepperton Studios. So they moved it to England. So he ended up only using English talent for it.
That's why a lot of them you've never heard of. Yeah.
That's why a lot of them you've never heard of and never heard since or whatever. But the neat thing that I wanted to say about Cy Enfield, because you said he had only been a B movie kind of guy, was because he had 3 different pseudonyms as a writer because he was blacklisted. He was one of the blacklisted during the McCarthy era, and he refused to give names, and they were going to arrest him, so he fled to England and lived there. And even when he moved to England and produced, directed, and or wrote films, he had to use pseudonyms so that they could still get distributed in the
United
United
States.
States.
Pseudonyms and what's he known for then?
You can look him up. He's got, there was one that, let me see if I can find it real quick for you, Tim.
I was going to say, it must be something great if you're big on him, but you don't even know.
Well, Zulu was his big one. He did Zulu, which was a great big huge action, kind
in
of
the 60s, whatever.
Yeah.
And he did that, I guess, because it's got English tie-in to it. I don't know.
Yeah, he did Sands of the Kalahari. He did a couple. These are all under his name, not his pseudonym.
Right.
His last one was a 1971 film called Universal Soldier, which at first I thought was the whole Kurt Russell one, but it wasn't.
No, it's not.
It's a different Universal Soldier.
Yeah, I saw it. I was like, I never have heard of this. I was like, I don't know any of these movies. Who is this motherfucker? And I don't know. And I've got some notes on him as far as what people thought of him as well. And it's not pleasant.
Well, he did he wasn't easy to get along with because he came from theater and he was very I don't want to say pretentious, but I think there's probably it was bad timing that his political views were at the same time as McCarthy. He was very, he definitely was a communist sympathizer.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So, but big deal. But so, I don't think he's a good director based on this movie. Obviously, the pacing of this movie is absolutely horrible.
Yeah, it is. It makes Swiss Family
action
Robinson
movie
look
to
great.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And it goes from action sequence to boredom instantaneously for way too long. And all of his action sequences are way too long. This movie felt like it was 3.5 hours long. It was 91 minutes. I mean, so if you're out there and you haven't seen it, go watch it. But oh my God.
It is so abrupt. I mean, the
Yes.
ending's just like, oh, credits.
Terrible ending.
I was
Terrible
like, damn.
ending.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a kid movie. It's something you will love as a kid because of the giant monsters. But other than that, there's not a lot memorable about this movie at all.
No.
What else do I have? I've got that it was greenlit, particularly because of the success of Swiss Family Robinson. So there are huge keys
sense.
to Swiss Family Robinson.
Oh my gosh. Huge. Yes.
I mentioned that that the original novel does not contain any of the large monsters or animals, but it does. One of the things that it does have in connection with it is that in connection to another work is that the extinct fauna features predominantly in Journey to the Center of the Earth, which is another Verne novel, not this.
Yep.
And they kind of put that in this movie, which is, I don't know. It's like they were just picking and choosing little bits and pieces from Verne books. And you're more familiar with Verne than I am.
Well, I also think it's a Harryhausen deal too. I think Harryhausen was a Verne fan anyway.
Yeah.
But I think he also said, hey, I can do a giant crab here. Let's do a giant crab.
I think you're totally right. And we have talked about this in the past, especially in that first Men in the Moon. It's like Harryhausen kind of takes over the movie because of what he can do with stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not to take away from him, because I think he's brilliant and I love his stuff and what he does. And some of the work in this is great. Again, I mean, you can tell he's learned a lot from the, Sinbad. And he's much better at, and there's a lot of choices. I'm saying exactly what you're saying. I think there's a lot of choices that were forced on the director from Harryhausen or the effects team.
And I said the same thing about First Men in the Moon.
Yeah. There's a lot of those really long shots with forced matte paintings of little bitty people walking and doing everything. And it goes on way too long. And you're going, I don't need to see this. But the reason you're seeing it is because, this is a cool shot.
Yeah.
And the special effects guy is in charge of it.
Yeah. And as a kid, that's what we remember the most. These giant creatures,
Oh, yeah. Giant bees, the stupid chicken thing.
It's not even a chicken. It's just a weird looking bird.
That was a terrible scene. Just terrible.
And that went on for a while too.
Oh, yeah. It went on way too long. I love some of the effects in it were cool. I mean, even the guy jumping on its back and all that, but it went on way too long and didn't make sense. I mean, the thing could suddenly snap over here and kick through a fence, but it can't claw her. And she's laying on the ground in front of her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't shoot. You'll hit Herbert. So let's make this scene longer.
Yeah. Don't shoot. You'll make the scene too short.
Yeah, exactly.
Harry's not finished with his effects for this one. I did like and don't understand how he did not get sued, but I loved the Nautilus miniature. Thought it looked great.
It looks very similar to the one in the Disney film. Yeah.
Duh.
Yeah.
Very, very similar. And even on the inside with the way the organ is and the of course, then again, in the novel, it is described that way. He opens up the huge door and you can see that, this huge pipe organ at the other end of the room with the salon sort of thing. But
I'm looking, he had not done. Oh, yeah, he had done a Sinbad movie. He did a Sinbad movie in 1958. He did 20 Million Miles to Earth, Sinbad, Gulliver, which was filmed on the same island as this, off the coast of Spain, and then Mysterious Island. Then he did Jason and the Argonauts, First Men in the Moon, and Going Forward. Okay, so there was a Sinbad movie in the past. He did multiple Sinbad movies, like 2, maybe even 3 or 4.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think Sinbad and Gulliver were the first in, quote, dynamation, right?
Oh, who knows? I just remember that word. I mean, didn't he have a word for when he did 20 Million Miles to Earth too? I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There was a one for that one too.
Like, I think it was dynamation, and now we're into super dynamation.
Yeah.
or something, because that was actually looks like a dinosaur, and that's why he called it Dynamation, I think. But anyway, yeah. So I think it's easy to conclude that this is definitely a Harryhausen vehicle.
Oh yeah, easily. I think mostly because, with the exception of Herbert Lom trying really hard, none of the acting is really good.
I think it's fine. Some of it, the women to me are not good. Some of the guys I think are pretty good. The African American guy is not good. And the British guy trying to do a Southern accent is terrible.
Oh yeah, he's very bad.
But I'm okay with Michael Craig, and I'm okay with Michael Callan.
See, I think my problem with Craig is I even put in my notes. I even put in my notes, it shouldn't be his POV. I know it kind of has to be because he's the leader and he's the Kirk character kind of thing, but I don't like him doing the voiceovers. I didn't like him, period. I didn't like his character. I didn't think any of these characters are. I mean, we know more about the one guy in his 2 scenes in the time machine who's the drunk, who obviously they call him Doctor. And, he's loving the wine and commenting on George and all that. But we know more about his character than we do any of these guys in this entire movie. What motivates them, why they're doing it, what they do. We know Nemo preaches to the New York Times guy about you're really a warmonger, or you're a mouthpiece for the war.
But that's not necessarily the fault of the cast. That's the fault of the writing.
Yeah, but yes, it is. But there's also nothing to them. They're very blank.
Well, I just mentioned that 2 of the writers were television writers, and the other one was, the only thing I know him from is House of Wax.
Yeah.
And B movies like House of Wax. So I think a lot of it has to do with the writing more than the acting. But anyway, speaking of that, before we move on to cast, I just want to ask you, what do you think of Bernard Herrmann's score?
He's always got a great score. He's always got dynamic motifs. I love the theme of it. I do think it's a little over. The one that really bothered me was the chicken fight. I think it's very overplayed for that one. And bombastic, but I love the beginning because the theme that starts it at the beginning with the balloon in the storm still being moored and everything else is so mysterious. I mean, the minute you hear it, you think, ooh,
Mysterious Island.
This is going to be cool. This is different. And,
I totally agree. I think the music stands out in this movie, but more so than the cast.
And it says a lot for him as the composer that he was, to be able to establish a mood and an emotion just within a few short notes and the orchestration that he chooses.
And it's just 1 year after Psycho.
Yeah. Which is, which he thought of as a one-off kind of thing, I'm sure. Right. Whereas this had much more orchestration to it, much more thematic power to it. But like you said, you end up humming that theme when you leave.
Oh yeah. I was like making something. I was making food in the kitchen afterwards and I could not get it out of my head. Yeah. I was like,
were you making giant chicken?
No, I was making almond macarons.
Oh, okay. There you go.
To take to a friend's house for dinner. Okay. Cast. Michael Craig plays the lead, Captain Cyrus Harding. Michael Craig is the only surviving cast member for this movie. He is still alive.
Well, it's because he's the captain.
29, the same year that my mother was born. And she has been dead over 20 years. So that
wow.
My mother died somewhat young. She was in her 60s. But this means that he's in his 90s. So
okay, then.
He greatly enjoyed making the film, but he did not enjoy working with Cy and Field, whom he described as, quote, useless and a dismal arsehole of expat American. And he described Schneer as a real Hollywood suit, the epitome of the son-in-law also rises.
Wow.
Yeah. Michael Craig did not like the producer nor the director of this film.
Well, okay then.
I don't know much about Michael Craig because he's a British actor and he's predominantly in British stuff. So I'm not
Mhm.
sure if he's well thought of in England or not, but he had opinions about this. the people in
Obviously.
this movie. Joan Greenwood played Lady Mary Fairchild. Do not know her. She did B movies and television, from what I can tell. Michael Callan, however, who plays Herbert Brown, who is supposed to be sort of a teenager, I guess you would say.
Yeah, the love interest.
Yeah, his biggest movie was Cat Ballou.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he did lots
Love
of
that movie.
television. But do you know what he is best known for? And I bet
No,
you don't.
That's what I knew him for. That's what I thought of. But
Well,
what?
this surprised me, but he is best known for originating the role of Riff in West Side Story on Broadway.
Really? Okay, I
Yes.
could see that. I could easily
and that's
see him
what
in that
makes
role.
me think that these actors are pretty good. They just had a bad script.
Yeah, makes sense.
Same with Gary Merrill. Gary Merrill was a solid movie actor from the 40s and 50s. He played Gideon Spilett in this.
Yes.
I know him because I refer to him as Mr. Betty Davis. He was married to Betty Davis because they met when he starred in All About Eve.
Yep, I remember him from that.
And then, like lots of 40s actors, he went on, or 40s and 50s actors, he went on to do television afterwards. So we don't know him from much more.
And a lot of
than All About
Westerns.
Eve.
He did Westerns too.
Right.
I remember his face
Right.
being, yeah.
So Gary Merrill, we know. Herbert Lom is another person I love, a British actor from Hammer Films. He played the Phantom of the Opera
Yes.
in the Hammer
In a great version. Yes.
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 He also was the doctor in The Dead Zone, the Cronenberg movie that I love, the Stephen King movie, as well as I think he played the villain in the Pink Panther movies, didn't he?
No, he's Clouseau's boss.
Oh, he's the boss guy.
He's
director.
the one that always has the twitch in his eye and it starts twitching.
So, I mean, Herbert Lom is a great actor, and they couldn't
very
get
good.
James Mason. They wanted James Mason, but they could not get James Mason because of probably legalities, if anything. So what did they do? They went to Herbert Lom and said, do your best. And I'm okay with that. And his white hair. Beth Rogan played Elena Fairchild. I wrote she must have retired because she doesn't have any credits after 1968. Yeah, she was probably the weakest link in this whole movie.
Oh, yeah.
And then Percy Herbert played Sergeant Pencroft, the Southern or the Confederate soldier of the bunch. I didn't hate him. He had a terrible Southern accent, but he's known for other movies. He did Guns of Navarone, Bridge on the River Kwai, 1 Million BC.
Yeah.
So I was okay with him.
Big roles in Bridge on the River Kwai, big role. He was great in that. I guess I should retract my earlier thing. I don't like any of the characters in this film, not the
Understood.
actors. Yeah.
I mean, to me, it was similar to the cast of Swiss Family Robinson. I mean, they're all just, it looks almost, it looks a lot like a Disney movie to me, just not as good. Not as good.
One of my keys is if the other one looked like, a Hammer film, this looks like a Disney film.
Yeah,
to me.
I could see that. It's a little, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. Probably a little more extreme for a Disney movie.
There's a lot more, but then again, not
Horrific,
Disney at the time.
yeah.
Think of 20,000 Leagues. 20,000 Leagues is a great Disney movie.
And it's got a monster in it. Yeah.
It's got monsters and action and everything.
Lastly, Neb Nugent was played by Dan Jackson, and all I have were TV movies for him or television for him, but he did have an uncredited role in Live and Let Die. I'm assuming he was an extra. I don't know, because I don't remember him in Live and Let Die at all. I just remember the 7-Up dude. Can't remember his name, but I remember the 7-Up commercial. And to give you an idea of why this movie is not as good as The Time Machine, is that it was not awarded anything. It was not nominated for anything, and it is not on the list of 1,001 movies you must see before you die. So this movie is not really remembered. So
I mean, it's sad that it's not because it is, like you said, it's a good kids movie. It's good fun, Harryhausen movie.
mm-hmm.
And it is an adaptation. It's a sequel to 20,000 Leagues. I just wish they had either tried to take more of the novel, and it's more of a societal story and less of a survivor story. It's kind of a combo of both, but once Nemo is in it, and he should have come into it a lot sooner. The point is,
because he's the best actor of all of them, probably. Yeah.
Well, in his story in general, rationalizing this whole thing of a man who has spent the majority of his life with these incredible inventions that he's done, and now he's got a way that could actually, destroying army people or military or anybody who wanted to make war. And now he's got this incredible plan that could, create food for the entire world forever. So you wouldn't have to fight over that anymore. And it's lost in this stupid battle with pirates at the end. It's lost by the very thing that he was fighting his entire life, which was, aggression and people fighting each other.
And I can't help but think, I mean, the minute you see that pirate ship, it's like, oh, Swiss Samuel Robinson.
Oh yeah.
It's like a total ripoff. Well, my whole thing is, came first. Which came first? Do you know?
They're about 100 yards off the coast. None of them survived. Really? Not one pirate swam? Because in the novel, they do. I mean, most of them survive. The ship is sunk, but they go, there's a battle from now on.
And Swiss Samuel Robinson was a big hit the year before when Time Machine came out. So they were trying to cash in on that shit.
I'm sure they were. I am sure they were.
Yeah.
See,
like I was going to say, before we do keys, what else you got?
Well, like in my scenes discussion, I've got the bee. Oh, yeah. That's it. The bee. And the very beginning with because this time it really hit me, but when I was a kid, it didn't. The balloon is a miniature. That's a miniature.
All the balloon stuff's great. I thought it looked real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did too.
In the storm and stuff, it looks awesome.
The crash at the end when they're climbing up onto the thing
and trying to drop down in the water. Oh man, I love that. Loved all that.
And the storm and all. It's a combination of miniature, optical effects, and practical. I mean, they built the whole ring, of course, in the basket, but that was a great sequence.
Yeah, I thought so too. As far as scenes, we really didn't talk about scenes. I kind of jumped into cast, but the scene where Nemo comes out of the ocean, that's very, very effective to me. It's like, who is this mysterious man?
If he had been wearing his armor, his suit from 20,000 Leagues, it would have been great, but instead he's wearing the stupid seashell crap.
And like a seashell backpack.
Yeah, those are dumb. It's dumb. But
it is. I still like the scene, the reveal. The reveal is very effective to me. Of the man coming out of the water, you're like, who the hell is that?
And they needed more of that to me. That would have kept me kind of suspenseful during these gigantic monster attacks, because you've got the only clues you have are the captain's rescue in the fire and the bullet. And now you've got the ship mysteriously blowing up, and then Nemo shows up. And I'm like, it would have been better to have a little, the crate, the case, the floating crate that shows up that has everything they need. There should have been more discussion about where did that come from, because it didn't come from your guy's ship. Right. But it's literally got everything we need, from guns, ammunition, a sextant, maps, There should have been more to that story. I think that's my problem with this entire movie. I was just frustrated with the
logic
in the way they did it.
Yeah. To me, there's problems with logic, especially in structure of scenes. Not strength, probability, I guess is what I'm thinking. The scene where Neb is in the claw of the crab, I'm like, there is no way he would live through that, because he is in that claw for way too long. He would be dead. And in a modern movie, he would have been dead. They would have just killed him. But I guess because he was the only black actor in the movie, that would have looked bad. And then
Yeah, agreed. And in the
The
next
s-
scene, he's playing harmonica and dancing. And I'm going, oh no, you got a broken rib at least, dude. I mean,
right.
come on. You
And
got
it
something.
also is it's a little cliche and racist I don't know. In modern day it is anyway. The scene where the teenager and his girlfriend go up to the beehive in the cave, where they get imprisoned by the giant bee, the scene you like.
Yeah.
Well, when they get out, they roll down a little ramp and all of a sudden there's the water and the Nautilus. And I'm like, didn't they climb a mountain to get up to that thing? Why would the water be so...
It's not shown very well in the thing, but they're burning a hole through the back side of the hive, not the front side.
I agree.
So,
I know that. I'm talking about
they're going
height.
out.
Why would there be water level that high when they climbed up to that? Even if they go out the back side, there wouldn't be a lagoon with a submarine in it.
Well, yeah, there could be, Timmy, and look, there's a grotto hidden back over there.
Well, if they had fallen down further, maybe, or gone down further into some caves, maybe, but they literally rolled down a ramp that's like 5 feet long, and all of a sudden there's a lagoon with a submarine. I was like, no way.
True. They needed to climb down a little bit, sort of thing. And I have the other thing too.
Once they get there.
So we never saw tracks or anything with this chicken before it just suddenly appears. I'm sorry, but normally a bee is not one or three of them. We only see three in the movie, but there's probably a lot more is based on that hive, and we never saw them before either. They weren't, and they got to get They got to get nectar somewhere where they just are pollen. Where were they buzzing around? That
you don't see them at all before then. Yeah.
I've got in my notes. So we're training you to use the equipment, breathe underwater, build a bamboo pipeline, get everything secured and settled, build a raft. And we're doing this in 2 days.
Because the volcano is going to explode.
Yes. And even then, it's early. So we did that in a day. We did that in one freaking day. But the rest of the next day that we're panicking, we get the balloon, which only takes half an hour to repair. He says, what? Why didn't we repair it in the...
That's what's so funny. It's like as the volcano is already exploding, it's like, I've got a better idea. Let's use the balloon.
Yeah. And you could have easily changed that by just saying, I give it a week at most before it goes, blah, blah, blah. Instead of 2 days, we have 2 days to do all of this and get off the island. And there's no motivation of, I suddenly want to get off the island and tell you my story. No, why? We don't get any of that.
Just take the fucking submarine.
But my last note is there's no reason why the Nautilus doesn't sail. We don't say why or what happened. Or
his reason is that he wants to take proof of his experimentations as far as the giant food and giant animals. And I guess they will fit on the ship, but they will not fit in the submarine. I don't know.
All he's taking are a bunch of rolled up plans. That's all he's taking.
Yeah.
So I was
take the damn submarine. Yes.
Yeah, take the submarine for God's. I mean, if they had said, "Oh, it ran out of fuel. We have no more of the atomic energy to power it," something. Give us some reasons for some of this stuff.
The probability of bringing up a Spanish galleon or whatever that ship is from the bottom of the ocean is insane, and it's a stupid plot device in the first place. It's like they need a ship. Okay, we'll have pirates attack and we'll sink it, and then we'll bring it back up and use it.
Right?
Who wrote this? This is terrible.
And while they're doing that, they'll be attacked by a cephalopod that is not scary at all. That hopefully will remind everybody of 20,000 Leagues, maybe.
Yeah.
That was a bad sequence.
Except it's a squid, but it's got a snail shell on it. It's like
it's a cephalopod, Tim. I looked it up.
Yeah, but I don't think there's such a thing as one that.
Oh no, they made that up.
Yeah, squids don't have shells, and that's a shell.
Harryhausen made that up so it would look cool and neat.
Right. It's like a combination snail and squid.
Yeah. It's like, here, can I do my pseudo squid battle here?
Oh my God. We could go off forever on this. Movie.
Yeah, it was not as good as it should have.
Or as I remember what I best sum it when I thought about it in the shower this morning is I love the Time Machine for all reasons, for nostalgia, for quality, for, just art. And this one I only like for nostalgia. I don't like it for anything else. I just like it because, I remember watching this as a kid, that kind of thing. And that's it.
I did read that there was a man-eating plant sequence that they actually ended up cutting because
I read that too.
And I was going, so we could have had Little Shop in this as well. Come on.
That would have been a great monster because it would have been unexpected. Yeah. Do
that instead of the cephalopod at the end, which was just
the big
silly.
Chicken or bird or whatever the thing was.
Please, not the chicken. The chicken, that was a terrible, bad battle.
And then I also read something about him determining their longitude and latitude, which was approximately 7,000 miles from where they started in Richmond, which means that they traveled 7,000 miles in that amount of time. So I decided to look up the longest balloon trip, and the longest balloon trip is 22,000 miles, but it took 2 weeks. It took 13 days, and I don't think they were in there that long to go 7,000 miles.
Well, he said we only had 4 days of food. So that was stated when they left.
Okay.
Sort of.
Well, maybe it's accurate. I don't know.
But it was a really fast gale. It's a really fast gale. They covered about, 1,500 miles a day.
Well, and I want to say at one point someone says New Zealand, and at one point says Fiji, and then I want to say we don't really know where the hell they are. It's a mysterious island
with an actual civilization underneath it that makes us think it's Atlantis, but it's not, because Atlantis is in the Atlantic.
Well, and that's another thing that really cracked me up is I was like, wait a minute, you're saying this is in the Pacific, but you've got relics of Africa and Greece in the ocean.
Yes, in the ocean.
That makes no sense whatsoever.
No.
Because there are Egyptian things down there and there are Greek temples down there.
Yep. Again, it's Harryhausen going, this would look cool. Let's do this. Yeah.
And as a kid, I thought it was great. Yeah.
Yep, me too. I remember, giant crab. I remember giant bees. I remember the octopus. I called it an octopus when I was a kid because I didn't know the difference, really. It was a tentacled underwater thing with an eyeball. So,
Keys. I'm just thinking we've probably trashed this movie.
Every other Harryhausen movie ever made, basically, has the same kind of thing to it, where they'll have a scene, and then suddenly they'll go into a special effects scene, and they'll just do it until the battle's over, and that's it.
Yeah, and then of course the Verne novel, which is the original material.
Jules Verne novel. Yep.
Yeah. 20,000 Leagues, obviously.
Obviously, because it's a sequel to it. We've already mentioned Land of the Lost. Mm-hmm. We've already mentioned Swiss Family Robinson. I'd also say Robinson Crusoe, because I think that's mostly told, that's a good key for any shipwreck movie. How do you survive, when you're stranded, kind of thing. I've got another H.G. Wells novel, which also they kind of added this, which is Food of the Gods, which was about gigantic. So it's kind of like they combined that with Mysterious Island.
Yeah, I have that in my notes as well, in my keys as well. I also have King Kong, not because they directly rip off a scene from King Kong where they cross that tree across that big gulch or whatever, which is completely lifted from King Kong, but just because of the fact that they are on a mysterious island with large creatures, which is what King Kong is. So
exactly. That's a great one. And I have Irwin Allen, because the whole last half of this is a disaster movie. It's done just like a disaster movie. As a matter of fact, part of it could be a travelogue on volcanoes, because they're standing there looking and the volcano footage goes on for like 5 freaking minutes. I'm going, okay, we get it. The volcano is blowing.
But that's hilarious. And I see what you're getting at literally, but it so sounded figuratively when you said it because it's a disaster.
Well, and Irwin Allen learned that, give the characters, put them in a disaster, let them try to survive.
Oh,
that's what
so funny.
He did a lot.
You mentioned Land of the Lost, and I mentioned Land of the Lost mainly because of those high caves. Those caves that are up really high. Where they built the elevator. I mean, that's very Land of the Lost, the high caves and the man-made elevator. But
and stop animation and puppets.
Mm-hmm.
They did that for Land of the Lost too.
Correct, they did. But when we did this other movie, I used Land of the Lost as a key too because of high caves, and that's Mad Max Fury Road. There's those high caves up in that movie as well.
Yeah,
they're like inside of a cliff.
I've got a Star Trek reference because that is definitely a Roddenberry skirt. That is a Roddenberry skirt big time. I mean, it is. I was going, oh my God.
That's funny.
Rollerball, just because anytime I hear Toccato and Fugue, I think of Rollerball. So, and that's
Bach. That's Bach. Just put Bach.
Okay, Bach, but I don't associate Bach. I associate Rollerball.
Okay, that's hilarious. I already mentioned that Herbert Lom, and I don't even know if this is really a key, but Herbert. Yeah. Oh, I know what it is. It's the first of 3 movies in which Herbert Lom plays a pipe organ.
Oh,
he did it
really?
in this movie. He did it in Phantom of the Opera, and he did it in The Pink Panther Strikes Again. That's why I have it as a key, because it's the pipe organ.
I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, he does. This movie has had a few remakes of it.
And I saw that Patrick Stewart's in one of them.
I looked at the trailer. You've got to watch the trailer for it. It's a Hallmark movie, for one thing. That's a bad red flag right there. It stars Patrick Stewart as Nemo, and the captain character is Kyle MacLachlan.
I saw that, and I was like, if I had time, I would watch this.
It looks terrible. It looks really bad.
And it probably doesn't have giant monsters in it, which would make it even worse.
No. And instead, Nemo wants to get off the island because he has a weapon that will destroy major cities. And I was going, that is the exact opposite of what Captain Nemo was. I don't understand what you're doing.
When did this come out? In the 90s?
No, it came out. I can look it up real quick.
Okay, yeah, I saw it when I looked this movie up to find out where I could watch it. I saw it and I was like, "What is this?"
Well, and I think some people get misguided because they get the. There's been another one that was called Jules Verne: Mysterious Island. It came out in 2010, but it looks foreign to me, so I didn't look it up. 2005 is the Mysterious Island, which is classified as a TV movie.
I assumed it was a TV movie because Hallmark. I've never heard of it.
Yes, I'm telling you, Hallmark. Yes. And then, of course, Journey to the Mysterious Island is not. That's a Dwayne Johnson piece of crap. So there's that. But yeah, it was remade and not in a very good way, in my opinion. So.
All right, we mentioned ties to Disney in this film as well as the predecessor. There is another big tie to Disney in this that I find fascinating. So I copied this from IMDb. Okay. Bernard Herrmann's main title score for this movie was used by Walt Disney for the Disneyland Railroad in California. And it can be heard while the train passes through the Primeval World portion of the attraction between Tomorrowland and the Main Street stations.
Wow.
So I guess Disney liked the music enough that he bought it.
Great.
And uses it in the park. I love the music.
There you go. But I do too. I agree.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we were going to put both of these, in the comparison, I would definitely say, Time Machine would be, a 9, and this would be like a 3. I think that would be my
absolutely.
both based on classic science fiction novels, both based on works of classic science fiction authors, both with some, great production values to them, but one definitely exceeds as far as story and acting goes, and the other one does not.
Yeah, I couldn't sum it up better. Yeah. And we would like to thank all you folks out there for listening to this long show today. That's what you get when you get a double feature.
That's right.
And if you like what you hear, we would love it if you would give us a review. If you're watching us on YouTube, please go down there and hit that subscribe button, like and or comment, and let other folks know about us. We have other shows on YouTube as well, including coming attraction shows like Coming to Get You, Shudder or Streaming Horror with Tim, which are horror movie shows, and we do top fives occasionally as well. Here lately, I put up we've been doing particular years of horror and sci-fi. And if that's not enough for you, you can always go over to Patreon, where you will find other shows, including free bonus content as well as subscription content. And in the subscription content, you get extra goodies as full-fledged shows, basically, with Star Trek and the X-Files. So if you get maybe as little as a cup of coffee a month, you can get these shows as well. We have done 2 seasons almost of both those shows. So there's a good 60 something shows at least over there as well. And they're shorter because they're television. And until next week, when I'm assuming that we're going to be back in the land of horror.
Oh, yes. Scary.
Scary, scary. I will be seeing you, David.
See you, Jim.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
You can't start the car. Johnny has